Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Well, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj intervened today after a group of African nationals faced a mob attack in a neighborhood of Uttar Pradesh near Delhi. The minister took to social media and announced the steps she has taken to ensure safety of the African students staying in Greater Noida. The attack on Monday evening coincided with a protest that was organized by online groups who blamed the unexplained death of a teenage resident on the African community. The attack in Greater Noida is a reminder of the summer 2016 attacks on Africans in India, which included the death of a Congolese national in Delhi. The incident prompted African diplomats posted in India to skip official celebrations, casting a shadow on India's ties with African nations. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take a closer look at the menace of racial attacks and how to deal with the problem. Joining me on the program today are Suresh Goel, former diplomat, Marwah, former Delhi Police Commissioner, Awwad, South Asia expert, and Dayal, writer and social activist. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Dayal, I'd like to start with you, of course, and ask you, this is not something that is new that we are seeing here in India. It's a problem that has been going on for several decades. You know, I come from a city called Bangalore, and in the 1990s, early 90s, I witnessed a similar kind of problem in that city where the Iranians were chased away from Bangalore as a result of what they were doing there. So this problem persists for a long time now. How do we deal with it?
No, the violence is just a part of it. It's when it sort of bursts into the news headlines and into your consciousness. But racism, alas, is a fact of life. Our language reflects that. When you use certain terms, they're meant to define Africans. And in fact, Delhi itself, because of historical reasons, has had, let's say, a slave dynasty, as it was called. And I would say, if you really go into history, there has been a streak of racism against people of African origin all across. The Siddhis in Gujarat, in North, and you said your memories go back to the 80s. Some of our memories go back decades earlier, when the international students hostel opened at Mall Road in Delhi University, and people started coming in on various government schemes which were then launched. And we had people from Africa, and some of them used to live in the hostel, and others lived in the colonies nearby, Model Town, Tego Park, Mukherjee Nagar, Outer Line, all those areas that were there. And every time the students went there, there would be a chain of young children shouting the H word, it was then, against them, and it was very much a fact. And if perchance they came into contact with, let us say, a policeman, sure enough, he would not address them for the name or whatever, he would call them by that name. So racism and a discrimination against Africans in general has been rampant. Maybe it is not so much against people of Middle Eastern origin, because many of us look like many of them, as it would not be against Sri Lankans, because many of them would look like me. So, but Africans do stand out, as in fact do people of the Far East, and then they face it. Violence, whether it is in parts of New Delhi or wherever they congregate, whether it was Munirka, manifests itself also because young people are there. Some of their habits are strange to the neighbors. It manifests. There's an accident, there's anything that friction, like any other issue, it comes to the fore. It's tragic. But I would like to hope that with TV, with a larger opening up of India exposure, it should reduce. But sometimes these cruel things happen, and that's no good at all.
Sure, fair enough. Mr. Marwah, how does the police deal with a situation, that arises out of such kind of incidents? It's a difficult situation for the police to be in as well, isn't it?
No, it's a simple law and order problem, which the police should act in an exemplary manner by acting very promptly, arresting the culprits. There is these days you can get videos. It shouldn't be difficult to identify. They have arrested 7 or 8 persons, but that is not enough. They because there was a big crowd, and they should arrest each and every one, complete the investigation quickly, and put the charge sheet, so that these people get the punishment for their criminal act as early as possible. That will act as a deterrent. But I think there is a larger issue. In our country, it's a shameful reality, but the fact is that there is a color complex. This won't happen to whites, it happens to black. And that is something which needs to be dealt with at various levels, at the school level and in our media and at all other, these are social media and all are very active. It must be condemned in the strongest possible way, because it presents a terrible picture of our country, which takes pride in being one of those tolerant country, always fighting for human rights. And here, from what I watched on the television, here is a mob which is standing there and not intervening and defending, protecting these two innocent students. I think it was absolutely shameful.
Indeed, a shameful incident, and not just a one-off incident. Incidents like this keep happening in India. But you know, while Awwad, you of course are not from India, you are from Syria, and you look at South Asian, South Asian aspects very, very closely. Were you ever discriminated upon in India in the past? Let's not forget that this particular problem is not limited to India alone. All over the world, racism is a major problem.
Well, I can speak from my own experience being a student, ex-student of under the exchange program, general scholarship exchange program between India and Syria. When I came to India, I think I have traveled to Haryana, I traveled to Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, and also into Rajasthan. Then finally I got the admission in Delhi, where I studied. I do say that there always been discriminate among the foreigners, but not in general to us, because we maybe we had a different kind of a look, maybe we didn't have attitude toward the Indian, where they took us in a good faith. I think there has been lots of incidents. In fact, I remember in Jabalpur as well in 1980s, we had some problem with the African, with the city people, with the hostile people. It always been there. I don't see it in India in isolation. In anywhere in the world, there has always been a discriminate acts. I mean, I just looking at it from an angle of a foreigners. Like if you are an Indian, where you can see an Indian getting beaten in Australia, how much the outrage will be in India against the Australian beating them. So similar is the fact that the people of Africa feel the same back home, where the children being sent to study, and India have increased the scholarship, and the private schools and education institute have opened widely for the African student, and yet we find such kind of an accidents. I think it is the responsibility of the states, it is the responsibility of the police to ensure that even the parties, in fact you can control a party in India, but you can't control a mob, and that is the tragic incidents here, because once a mob take the law into their own hand, there will be a mess, and therefore the police has to step in and ensure that the accountability and credibility should be restored to everybody in the Indian society, because India is opening for Africa. India is going in a big way to the African, all over the world, emerging power. I think such kind of an incident is untoward and should be condemned by all means.
Indeed, fair enough. You know, Ambassador, as far as India and Africa relations are concerned, you know, Prime Minister Modi and everyone else too are stressing on this relationship between India and Africa. The trade between India and the African continent stands at over $70 billion. So this doesn't go down too well, does it?
Let's put it this way. First of all, I don't think that we should put a correlation or any kind of a connection between relations between India and the African countries and what happens to, let us say, African nationals in India. Yes, I know, highly regrettable what happened, and naturally it's very, very natural for the African embassies here to take up the matter with the government of India, which they have done. But I don't think that these should be related at all, really. Our relations with African countries, they are on a very strong footing, and even the African nations, they do realize that what is happening here should not interfere with the relations as such. Having said that, I want to come to basically the issue of what is happening to the African students and what actually needs to be done. I will take 2 or 3 minutes here, if you permit me, really. I think we need to see, first of all, that India has become increasingly globalized. It's getting more and more integrated into the global chains over the last 20-30 years. And as it is, we are actually, we feel pride in our philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We are targeted in some of the countries, and we object vociferously to when we are targeted in countries like Australia or in the USA, etc., etc. Despite being targeted and then objecting to what happens to us, I think we need to ask ourselves, why is it happening here in India? Why there should be, and actually I think the number of incidents rather than going down seems to be increasing really. And I think there are 2 or 3 things here. And I am saying that basically because I come from the area where this is happening in Greater Noida, and we face the gate of the society. What has happened really there is that over the last 1 decade, 1.5 decade, 2 decades, in that particular area I am referring to now, because of the rapid development of the educational institutions, the number of international students in that area has increased very, very rapidly. With the number of increase in that number, the international students who obviously come from a different cultural background, the local communities who as it is are very uncomfortable, they begin to look at those cultural and the physical and the ethnic differences between them, and clearly the process of discrimination begins then. So here in this particular case, I think there was another factor which happened. Most of the local communities associate beg your pardon, but this is what actually happens. I don't believe in it. There is a perception there that they are also associated with the drug trade. And this drug overdose, when it killed a person, the anguish, the anger just broke open, unfairly of course, no doubt about that. So I think there needs to be a greater effort at cultural assimilation, particularly in the areas where there is a large population of international students. And since there is a whole number of educational institutions there, Sharda University, BIMTech, etc., it becomes their responsibility that they should conduct these kind of community access programs, community development programs, so that they don't feel alienated anymore in that area.
I think that's a very valid point that you're making of cultural assimilation, and we hope that that happens sooner rather than later. But John Dayal, I have a question to ask you as well, apart from the point that you want to make. You know, the ambassador raised the issue of perception and said that there is a perception that Africans are automatically associated with drug trade, and there also seems to be another, weird perception, I would call it, with Africans and cannibalism. I don't know where that comes from, because that's what many people said about this particular incident as well.
May I just answer that question? Sorry, John, just a second.
Yeah, please, of course.
Actually, what happened is funny again. They said that because of the decisions taken by the Chief Minister, the abattoirs are closing down, the meat supply is coming down, and they need to have the supply of meat. And that is where it leads to. Funny.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I regret it is not funny at all. And it has got nothing to do with drugs. Mr. Marwah will bear me witness. Late 60s, early 70s, the hippie movement, the flower children, at the peak, and everybody knew that they were stone dead. Drugs were there, and they were also supplying and sharing with others. And not one of them, the flower children, the beetle children, not one of them was assaulted in the manner that the Africans are targeted. But I did mention to you that the Indian term for the blacks was Habshi. It was basically from Abyssinia, historically, etymologically, but ultimately it got sort of conjoined and conflated to mean cannibals, and al-Habsh became a synonym. And that's what I was trying to say. In the 60s, when I was myself a student in Delhi University, and Mr. Marwah was a senior police officer by the time, this was what people used to chase them. That these are these strange people. But there is a substance in what he says otherwise. It also happens to the northeastern thing. I know about school hostels where the children from the northeast, and you mentioned you're from Bangalore, children from the northeast, and they collect, and even in Mulirka, and the other children presume that these people are clearing up the local dogs and eating them. So these are perceptions. Some of them may be true, some of them may be based in myths, but they are multiplied and they become part of the lore of the region.
How do we change that perception?
The perception is about everybody. How do you define the other? How do you define John, who's not Amitabh Bachchan, who's dark? How do you define the other chap, who's a Muslim, who's a Sikh, who's whatever? How do we relate to the other in the Vasudeva Kutumbakam? Because the other half of the shloka is only for the man of learning and reason. Is the world one family? For somebody who doesn't know a thing, the world is not one family. So we have to teach them that this is your brother. All of them, he may be yellow, he may be pink, he may be green, if he's a man from Mars, but they're like us. And the other and the us, when they become one, this ends. Hate, targeting of human, identifying them by these easy things, that should go. That requires education, what Mr. Marwah said. It requires in-depth education, which begins with the family. It's for the family to say, no, he looks different, but he's us. He's got fuzzy hair and not straight hair, but he's us. His nose is flat, his nose is sharp, but he's us. His skin color will not go away if he washes 10 times a day.
Sure.
He's us.
Sure.
This man is us. This boy, this girl is me. The moment you start looking in the mirror and seeing the other, you have solved everything.
Fair enough, fair enough. While Awwad, whom does the onus then lie on to bring about this education and this perception change then? Because I know for one, an example that my wife narrated to me a couple of years ago, where our neighbors said that we had to sign a petition because there were some Africans moving into our building, and she said that this petition had to be signed because otherwise the Africans would eat up our children. I mean, this is the kind of talk that goes along in societies today where educated people stay. So whom does the onus lie on then to change this perception?
They got degrees, but they're not
educated. It is a collective measure. It's not done by neither by the student nor by the government. Nor I remember during my early years in the university, we used to be associated with the ICCR. ICCR used to have a kind of international student federation or a council where I used to be very active in that, and many Africans were with us in Delhi University as well. So we were all part of the association. We used to host lots of parties. We used to host lot of cultural day where we are associated explaining to the people about the culture of different nation. But I would come back to the drugs, which is, I think it's unfortunate to link them to the drugs, because we might be, because of the social media and the networking now, they're focusing more on the African, that they are, especially the Nigerian, that they're running the drugs. There is no doubt there are lots of Nigerian are already smuggling, but let us not also forget that if you go to Dehradun or you go to Goa, you go to South Tamil Nadu area or what you call it, all these, Aurobindo and all, I traveled extensively in India and I have seen it in my own eyes. Nobody attacked anybody there, but the discrimination against African, it's always been there. There has been among the society, I am 100% sure about it. And when we contact the African student, they will tell you the resentment among some of the Indian who feel uneasy with them. But I can also tell you there are many, if African married to an Indian, Indians, and they are also settled here, and we have seen even tribes from Africa who are in Gujarat existed for years in India. These are all part of the Indian society. Indians are known for their tolerance, but now this kind of behavior, it is intolerance, and they're showing growing uneasy because there are politicians, there are officials who are involved in promoting and provoking and invoking this kind of hatred among the people when they take the law into their hand. I think it is the state, I come back, it is the law and order then has to be taken the call on these issues. Nobody else can do any harm, because if you have a problem in against the African or against those miscreants who are creating in the society the fabrics and the harmony, has to be dealt in a good manner, in an open and more transparent and quick, because these are now issues. It goes to like viral into the public and domain, and once it is in the public domain, it's very difficult to control it.
Indeed, fair enough. Mr. Marwah, I'd like to take a point that Awwad is making forward. The point that he made earlier about mob justice, and we've seen a lot of it in India. It seems to be in our system, in our blood, really, to take action as a mob, and we seem to get strength as in numbers, and that's what it is really. So how do you deal with a situation like that?
Well, by acting promptly against them, because a mob gives you a warning before it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. There will be 5%, then 10%, then 20%, and if nothing is, no action is being taken, then the mob becomes bigger. It is very easy to tackle a small collection of people, and the police officers should be mobile. Now this mobility in Greater Noida, I don't know how mobile the police is, you should know, Mr. Goel, but they should be mobile. So that if an incident is going to take place, like in Delhi, one of the credit which I can take for bringing in Delhi police was that any incident which takes place in Delhi, there is a cognizable offence taking place, police van will reach there within 5 minutes. Well, that was a target. But I think in Delhi we were able to achieve it to some extent, and that has acted in a very big way in preventing such incidents becoming a big. Here this huge mob would not have taken to beating these two students if when the few people were collected and action was taken against them. That I think the primary and second thing which I have already mentioned, that now that the incident has taken place, the follow-up action under the law must be taken expeditiously and in a very transparent manner, so that the message goes that this sort of discrimination against Africans will not be tolerated. Any violence against them is against the law, and it's against our, as I said, our culture. And
Not just against Africans, anybody for that matter.
anybody for that matter, but African mostly, because as I said, shameful reality is that there is a color complex, and we must recognize that and deal with it rather than putting it under the carpet. And,
Sure. Yes, you wanted to make a point, John Dayal.
No, but I want to expand on that point, because ultimately we also start attacking our own people from Nagaland, from Mizoram, from Manipur. I mean, you call these people Hapshi, you call them Chinki, you attack them. It is in how we define the other. 2 points I want to pick up and from what Mr. Marwah said. A, there should be zero tolerance against racism as it is now on gender crimes. There should be zero tolerance. And two, I think salutary message must go across the country, because it's not symptomatic. You're not treating Greater Noida, which is in Uttar Pradesh. You're treating all sorts of places across the country where there are foreign communities living. And I think everybody, the police should make it clear that there will be zero tolerance. They'll punish. The judiciary must ensure that the punishments are delivered, and the state governments must act. Collectively, we must learn to live with the other in peace.
Sure, fair enough. Yes, Ambassador, you wanted to make a point.
Two things here. I mean, there is no saying it again that the law and order situation must be dealt with in the most effective manner that it should be. Mobility is a problem, yes, but I think the police in Greater Noida, they do realize their responsibilities and they do act when situations happen, even if they are rather short of resources. But anyway, law and order is one part of it, and there is no doubt that it must be actually dealt with in a very, very effective manner. I want to take up one point that Goel said. He mentioned ICCR. And now, I think the integration of the communities or assimilation or working together or getting to know each other is a very important point. ICCR can only do so much. After all, you know, when the communities are living all over India, how much can you do really? I think what we need to do really is that see that break down the silos between the international, the foreign students and the Indian students. It happens when I was DG ICCR, very often there would be demands for creation of separate hostels for the international students on grounds that they are not used to living in the rooms with the fans, air conditioners, modern, etc., etc. Let them live together as the Indian students. Let the walls and the barriers break down. That is number one. Therefore, there should be greater intermixing of the students, really. Number two, my son studied in the USA and one in the UK. They have a very nice custom that every year for a month, there is home hosting, where they actually go and live with the family in the local community, and they get to know each other rather well. I think the educational institutions in that area, which is a huge number, they could explore that kind of a possibility of doing the home hosting, so that there is a greater cultural and society intermingling between the foreigners and whoever they are. Africans, there is a large number of actually students also from the West Asia there, in Greater Noida, all of them. Number three, here the administration, which both include both the politicians and the district administration, as well as the police, the communities, which includes people like us, the residents who live there, and the educational institutions. I think they all need to come together to do the, you know, kind of social, communal activities, community activities, where we engage everyone. And hopefully, not immediately, but in about year and a half, they will begin to know each other better. And I think the prejudices will come down.
Sure, fair enough. Yes, Mr. Marwah, you wanted to make a point.
No, I entirely endorse what Mr. Goel has said, but I think the role of the educational institution is more important than any other institution, because the fact, as I again emphasize, there is a very strong prejudice color complex and a prejudice against the African community. This must be removed right from the educational institution. We had some African students in our college, St. Stephen's in Delhi, and I can tell you that we never thought that there was any discrimination against them. They were treated as good or as bad as anybody else, and this is something which is you absorb in your behavior and conduct, and that we must see that this is done in every educational institution and not just in St. Stephen's College.
Sure, fair enough. And I just have another question for you too as well, Mr. Marwah. You know, as far as the law is concerned, do we have adequate laws to deal with situations such as this involving foreign nationals and foreign students?
No, the law is there. It's not only just foreign national. This behavior with anyone, even with an Indian, this is a crime and action must be taken. And it is only that when it's a foreigner involved, the police has got so many problems, their resources are limited, but they must be able to put this on a priority list and take action very promptly, even within their limited resources.
And send out a strong message.
Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. You know, I've got time to take just two quick comments on the program because it's that time of the show where, you know, I've completely run out of time. While Awwad, the way forward really as far as this kind of a problem itself is concerned?
I think it is only the government can do something, because nowadays even with social networking, nobody is free to do his own family, run after his own family. Everybody is busy with his own. But I believe that there has to be some kind of an awareness program should be, and strengthening the hand of the ICCR to increase, especially in those areas where the foreigner, and I also would suggest that the foreigner should integrate into the Indian society, learn the language, speak their own culture. That will also help in bringing the people together.
Indeed, fair enough. And John Dayal, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
No, thank you very much. What I would like to say is our economy is globalized. I personally am afraid that our mind is regressing. We are becoming more enclosed. We are ingrowing. I think our mind must follow the economy and become globalized. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. As much as the world is one family, I am the world's family. Let's believe in that. It was done by the ancients. Why can't we do it?
Indeed, why can't we do it? On that, you know, very enlightening note, I'm going to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests at this point in time for joining me on the program. Suresh K. Goel, Wade Marwah, Wail Awwad and John Dayal. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me on The Big Picture and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.